doing as much of anything that you can is inherently, to me at least, a great aspiration.
I think for me, it's not just a great aspiration. It's like figuring out the rules of the game. And to me, the universe is structured in such a way, and human beings are structured in such a way that the GTO solution is to do as much good as in the world as possible. It not only benefits everyone else, but it also benefits you. So it's like either choosing for you to be happy and everyone else to be happy, or to neglect that and say, actually, I'll choose to be less happy and I'll choose for everyone else to be less happy. And I choose the former, and that's how I see things. I see it as trying to be as kind as possible, trying to be as loving and honest as possible, holding up to all of these virtues, and trying to bring as much joy to the world as possible, try to remove as much suffering as possible. It's all benefiting me, and I see it in my day-to-day life. Since I decided to be a good person, the levels of depth that I've had in my relationships with myself or with my partner or with my friends is just fucking bananas. It's way more than I thought could even possibly exist. The level of love that I feel is so beyond anything that I thought possible. And I know it's largely because I've dedicated myself towards good, and it's opened up new levels of connection that weren't there before.
It's good to hear. Good to hear.
What are you feeling? Do you feel like that might convince you a little bit to even consider rededicating the North Star compass?
I maybe I'm consider for sure. I I think I'm just so young that I haven't really had a chance to experience enough to really calibrate what like my North Star basically.
Yeah, you seem like you've dived a lot into individualization, and by that I mean like it seems like you've created your persona more outside of social conditioning than other people by like thinking a lot for yourself. Not to say that you're not conditioned, because we all are, but it seems to me like you're like just from the tone that you speak in, it's like I can feel you questioning everything I'm saying, but not from like an egotistical dismissive way, just in like, hey, I've thought about this and this is my own opinion. You
Mm.
tell me if that's right.
I try to, and I've been like that over a while, and then you start to question like, is that who I am? Is that raised like, and you, you go down a whole rabbit hole of
Well,
like,
I used to believe that the GTO way of existing was completely psychopathically. I used to believe that you should only be out for yourself, and there was no logic to doing anything for anyone else unless it was going to help you. And it took me fucking many, many years of deep meditation and philosophical thought to decide to be a good person and to decide to dedicate myself towards good. And I think that unless you've made that decision consciously and deeply thought about it, I think that it's not really bolstered with strong foundations. And I think a lot of people's foundations for being a good person are actually super weak.
my guess is that it depends heavily on what you as a person see as valuable in life, right? So if you're heavily relationship driven, being the sort of first level of that psychopathic of like only out for yourself will result in terrible things. If you sort of go the second level of only out for yourself, you'll kind of see that relationships are what make me happy, and so I need to feed those. Um, and so being extremely selfish would be like helping other people to nurture those relationships that I am selfish for.
Yeah.
And then it looks like you've got to a third level where the entire world is your interaction with humanity as a whole is something that you value. And essentially why you even like stream or publish courses or do videos in general or podcasts is that you put some sort of value on how the world sees you as a whole, and so optimizing for that is important for you.
Yeah, and then you go the level above that, and you realize that the idea of the you, the idea of the self, is non-existent in the first place, and the there is absolutely zero separation between me, you, or Mr. Super Shady in the chat, who's asking if there's ever been a woman on stage, which there has definitely not.
Uh,
I'm
well,
I'm trying.
I mean, you're running with the fact that YouTube is like what 90% male,
Yeah,
and
My
then
YouTube's like 98%. So yeah.
yeah, filter out for poker as well. You're probably filtering out
Yeah, yeah.
even more males. And then filter out for people that are confident or like confident is the wrong word, but have enough ego to think that they have something important to say or something important to question, and then like
May I say, by
provocatively.
the way, that this is a much more pleasant experience than a lot of the conversations I've had recently. And Hannah,
Really?
my wife, she gave me some advice before I came on. She was like, be more selective with whom you speak to. She was like, allow anyone to come on, but if you're not feeling their energy, if they don't feel like they're well intentioned or whatever, just ask them to leave or like whatever. Have fun the next person. So yeah, thanks for being fucking chill.
All good. You, some people find my energy very not chill. Like,
I could
but
see that
I,
Hannah would find you uncomfortable to be around because you're so intellectually based. You're so in your head. But I've spent my entire life battling to get out of my head because I've just been in my head my entire life, and it's like a very comfortable uh, yeah situation for me to be in. It's like how my all my family are. They're just like completely intellectualized. Like we could talk concepts for fucking days and days and days, but without much like too much like emotional involvement.
and do you think poker also conditioned you to think like that as well? Because you've got to be Uber in your head for hours and hours just running analytics permanently, right? So,
Yeah.
and then to profit off of that, you've also got a financial incentive to stay in that mode of operation.
It's interesting. So like when I was younger and I was playing the high stakes, I was exactly that. I was completely desensitized, completely emotionless. I was a fucking sociopath at the tables, man. I was a fucking killer. I won a tournament that barely broke a smile, you know. And then everyone else around me was, or the best players at least, were like that as well, but generally to less of an extent. But as I've grown spiritually, I've deepened my connection with my emotions, and I'm more viscerally reactive in my body and my mind when I feel things, and it's actually brought me to be way better at poker than I used to be, because when one's in touch with their emotions, they're also aligned with their intuition. So even though my intellect can sometimes still be taken awry by emotions, as I get used to it, that happens less and less. When I'm in flow, when I'm in my flow state, oh god damn it, I'm so much better than I used to be.
Yeah, flow is a time and a half. Yeah. Yeah, when you just get locked in and you just crush it, that's a
Yeah,
good feeling.
yeah. When it just feels
It's
like
a
you're
good
playing the
feeling.
universe like an instrument. When it feels like you're surfing on waves, and yeah, fucking hell. When you're playing poker and that's happening, fuck, it feels good. Could I
Do you ever
after you?
do you ever get that feeling where you're just sort of watching your subconscious do shit? Like it's kind of out of body, but it's kind of not. You get into flow state where you're just chilling and you're watching your subconscious do processing, and you're like, good idea, I'll do that. And it's do you ever get that? Or
It's an interesting way of framing it. I think you're probably describing an experience I'm very familiar with. I would describe it more as my my intellect and my intuition are flowing as one. you know, and I'm an observer of those two things. So it's like my, you know, when it's important, my intellect will count combos, you know, or it will go through whatever. But when it's too multivariate of an analysis to intellectualize in a moment, then my intellect will take a step back and my intuition will come in, and I'll feel what you might be describing there as like the subconscious, like there's like 10 variables that go into it that I fed through my intellect or my observation, and then my intuition will be like, okay, bet 33%. And yeah, it's like I'm watching my whole body, mind, psyche, soul fucking just yeah do its thing, and I'm just like there being like, yes guys, go on sons.
Yes. What's super wild is for one of my projects this year, I'm doing like neural net stuff, and that's almost exactly the process that we put neural networks through. So you do some pre-processing on the variables that you give
Okay.
to the neural network, and then you just throw it into this black box of essentially random or order through chaos
Yeah,
computation
yeah.
that just spits out a variable,
Is that like
which
Alpha
is
Zero? Is that how they did it?
um kind of. So Alpha Zero, I'll Google it actually, but Alpha Zero, I believe, had a map of what it thinks a human is going to play, or what it thinks the position is,
Mm-hmm.
and then what it thinks it should play, or search through all of those positions. And so you end up with a this is what humans do, so this is generally what's accepted. This is what I think is going to happen, and there's a process to search through it. So you're sort of going to be given, if my understanding is correct, you're going to have an optimal path to take through the sort of tree of possibilities in chess or go, and then it spits out with my level of depth search. I think this is the best move. Um, and so, but the more common structure is you'll do some pre-processing on some data. So whether that's something as simple as like noise filtering or um, just like a low pass filter. So I'm only going to take values that are above this range, and then you pass it to what essentially is computer intuition, and then process it that way, which is exactly what you described with this is too multivariate. I'm just passing it over to intuition, which
Maybe last question before someone else comes in. Do you think that we're close to passing the point where the human intuition is going to be surpassed by the computer intuition? Obviously, in chess and stuff, it is, but in maybe in something a lot more technical, more subjective, more open.
my so I think we need a lot of new developments to make that a reality. So kind of no, but I think so much of humanity's resources are being focused on it that I think it's inevitable that we make a lot of those discoveries very quickly in the coming years. Whether they're going to be enough, I don't know. My guess, it's not very informed. Like it's not very definitive or calculated. But
Yeah,
my guess would be like 50, 100 years, but
yeah.
it could be 10.
From the spiritual standpoint, there are many metaphysical phenomena that modern science doesn't understand about the human mind. The computers are very, very, very far. If not, they will never. Maybe they'll just never make it. Um, yeah, far away from getting there.
Um, we can simulate worms' brains, like basically one to one, because they're very simple and they just run around and bump into walls.
Yeah.
So I think with enough computation power, we'll be able to simulate a human brain.
The
Um,
question is, does a human have something like a soul? You know? And then how are we simulating that?
mm,
Maybe human minds exist on like 12 different dimensions that we're not aware of.
it's possible. We just don't have evidence for it. So
We don't have evidence that it's not. We actually do have evidence if you look at the cultures that have a larger understanding of consciousness, the yogis and things like this. But obviously that's debatable if you're in the modern scientific realms.
yeah, I would definitely debate you there, but that can be for another day.
Another day,
Get
Lachlan.
some
Dude,
time.
you're a fucking pleasant, very, very pleasant guy to speak to. And yeah, I'm very, very relieved the first person to speak to was you. So everyone in the chat, give it up for Lachlan.
Thanks.
Peace, brother.
Yeah. See ya.
See. All right, we're on a roll. We're on a peaceful roll.
Can you hear me?
Welcome, Chris. Is it your Epiphany Poker debate debut?
Thank you for having me. Yeah, so context of how I first heard about you, your book GTO ran, which is now like internet famous, right?
Fuck GTO.
Yeah, so I want to give you like, if I may, the tools or the language in order to have a better argument, because I think you're mostly right, to be honest, on how most people get theory wrong and how it's actually how they think they know what game theory means
Yeah.
and how they get the definitions wrong. So let's get one thing straight. When I talk of people say GTO, first of all, I would encourage all people to, because poker players tend to say game theory optimal as it's like a mathematical or university term or a textbook term, right?
Yeah.
Somebody try to Google game theory optimal, and please show me a single Google search result that is outside the context of poker, because you won't find it. So what I found was very interesting, quite recently actually. Game theory optimal is actually a poker term. It's not a game theory term. Optimal strategy is, equilibrium strategies are. But so, and here's what
I just want to interrupt you. I did not know that. I genuinely
Yeah.
thought the GTO was a more unanimous
Exactly,
term.
and that's where I think that's where the terminology and all this confusion arises, right?
Yeah.
Because of the word optimal. So here's where it begins. I first came across the term, I think it was in a Will Tipton book many years ago. Here's the difference between an optimal strategy and an equilibrium strategy. Because
By the way, your mic's a little bit shitty. Is there a way to improve it? Like speak closer to it or something?
Okay, do you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better. Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's fine.
So here's the fundamental definition. There's a difference between an optimal strategy in any given game, and then there's an equilibrium strategy. Now, an equilibrium strategy can be the optimal strategy.
Yeah.
An optimal strategy is not always the equilibrium. So let's use a simple example like rock, paper, scissors, right?
Yeah.
So playing rock, paper, and scissors at a 33.3% frequency is like the optimal strategy, right?
Yeah.
Once the other player deviates even slightly, like a single percentage point, the optimal response is to like hammer them choosing the best response against that. So if someone's choosing, so that's like pretty well known and it's explained and poker players understand this. Somehow it doesn't translate when you talk about like equilibrium strategy. So the best example is with like huge solver libraries online, right? Like GTO Wizard or GTO Base and a lot of them.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're not useful, they're extremely useful. The problem becomes like, for example, I briefly tuned into the CG conversation. So there's many examples of high stakes players deviating heavily, like pseudo people who think these are GTO gods, they're not playing anywhere near equilibrium strategies. For the simple reason, equilibrium, as in the rock, paper, scissors example, is very sensitive to the inputs. And to bring it back, I think, what would you say, Charlie, is your definition of what a solver does just to arrive at some common ground?
Sorry, I'm just thinking about what you're saying, and I'm really feeling it. So thank you, by the way. So what the solver does is it finds an equilibrium where it's trying to maximize the EV of its entire strategy, assuming that it's against another solver. So it'll simplify it based on how many bet sizes you give it, how many decision points it has, and try and fit in each hand to a certain frequency where it's completely not exploitable, but also maximizing its EV.
Yeah, that's a pretty good definition, by the way. So you clearly understand what's happening. The key point here about your answer is that what you're finding the equilibrium of is a very simplified version of no limit hold'em. It's not actually no limit hold'em. It's much more akin to limit hold'em, actually. Again, you see training sites, solver libraries sometimes like automatically check out of position, right? When you don't have the initiative or something, because it's just what most players do. And you're heavily simplifying the game of no limit hold'em. So you're finding an equilibrium of a game that you're not actually playing in practice. So that's number one. Number two, because the solver, as you said, has perfect information on the strategy of the heads-up play, right?
That was ambiguous from my perspective. Are you saying that it's not like that in practice because of the limited amount of bet options that we're giving, or because that we're playing against another human being that isn't a solver?
Because of the limited amount of bet options.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, because you have in a game that's by definition a game that has no limit on the bet size, only the stack size, and then you're actually limiting it in order to like solve it, right, or get close to an equilibrium. So you're first of all like thinking that you're actually finding an equilibrium to something like no limit hold'em is just baffling. And again, I actually think they're incredibly useful. But to the point again, so you're making very, very drastic simplifications of the game. So this what in turn leads to is, if listeners don't know, the way you come about pre-flop solver pre-flop generated ranges, like for example, in a 6-max cash game. What you do is you grab a subset of flops, like usually 100 and something, lower than 200 number of flops. And then what you do is you just try to have this, like, again, limited number of bet sizes post-flop, maybe always checking out a position, and then have the solver play against itself 6 ways, and then it will come up with these ranges, right?
Is that really how they do it? Only with a small amount of flops?
Yeah, you can actually see this. Will Tipton, again, the guy who wrote these excellent books called Expert Heads Up No Limit Hold'em, he came up with this with the like original concept, and the Pio solver guys went out and made a better subset of flops. And I think it's 170 something or 180 something, 184 it might be.
That's really that's not many flops.
Yeah, exactly. They do like, go to lengths to try to make them like as strategically different as possible.
Sure.
Right. So and then you just let the solver like run amok and play against itself trillions of times, and then it comes up with these like pre-flop ranges, right? So that's how it does it, because it's otherwise not computationally feasible. You would need like to borrow one of those like $1 million a day to run government computers to get any accuracy, right? So again, this goes someone who actually understands these things and who uses them, these tools called solvers, would say, okay, so but that is true, but we need to simplify the game in order to gain some insights. Okay, yes. And here's where we arrive at this like confusion, because the word optimal was just like dropped in there. We assume that equilibrium means optimal. It just means unexploitable and best response strategy against the other equilibrium, which is, again, you remove a single combo of a flush draw and it changes the strategy drastically, right?
Yeah.
You might have, because you can know that's what's called node locking, right?
Yeah.
So we've established that in order to come up with these pre-flop ranges, you're using like 190 flops, and then you're using these pre-flop ranges, which are severely limited, although very good, to use them as inputs, and then come up with these post-flop equilibrium strategies. And then what these solver libraries do is they just solve them for most common situations in heads-up pots, and then they spit out this library, and that's a solution to poker, right? So, so yeah, it's again, if you have any experience no logging or uh, let me, you play chess, right? Or you understand the rules pretty good.
Yeah,
Right?
I got like 2K ELO on chess.com.
That's pretty good. Yeah. Okay. So imagine you solve chess. Like chess, unbeknownst to people, is like very easy to solve compared to poker because
Yeah.
of the perfect information aspect. So yeah, it's been solved since the 80s. I mean, at least to it can a computer that can read a human, right? So if you, let's say, solve the opening, right, to the first four moves, and there's like those are the, let's say, optimal moves, right? You cannot find a best for starting lineup from either black or white. So let's say it's e4, d4, and whatever, right?
Yeah.
So let's say I'm playing against you, and you're playing like the optimal strategy, the optimal opening, right? From your white. If I'm black and I put myself, like I take my queen out, which would be a deviation in this example, and you have a chance to capture my queen. How stupid would it be to say, "Oh no, I'm a GTO player. I'm not going to capture the queen."
I'm only gonna do it like 1% of the time. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to capture the queen. So that's where it gets crazy because these players who have no concept of what college level mathematics are, have no concept of taking like an even introductory game theory course, are coming, and these are actually really good players, are coming and saying, "Oh yeah, GTO makes no mistakes." What the fuck is GTO? I mean, again, it's a made up poker term, which most people don't know. And number two, the optimal strategy. If you look up at the definition of optimal strategy, it's the best payoff strategy.
Yeah.
So if you're facing, and actually, Victor Kudinov, which is the top cash game player, said this on the Poker Ambition website, like as a tip for players, like don't feel like you have to do anything on poker. You don't have to call if you think the other player's range is like only the nuts, right? It's actually a blunder. It's not like you have to count combos and say, oh yeah, my hand is a bluff fletcher because it blocks the straight. Yeah, but if only the other player is only playing like straights, strips, or flushes plus, and shoving the river, what the fuck are you doing calling, right? Which is something that any thinking player should understand. So
somehow a lot of people don't.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, and that's why Victor Kudinov said that he likes to train players to use what's it called, Flopzilla first, because you get to like introduce manually the combos, and then you look how ranges interact, and you can make assumptions of how boards interact with ranges, and then you can go into a solver. And again, it's natural that how things have evolved. But the thing is that people don't understand is what people call GTO and these solver libraries are just people just renting out or buying a server, deciding that these are the 192 or 184 flops that we should solve using some actually good assumptions, and then solving it, getting those pre-flop ranges, using those as inputs, solving for mostly all of the possible heads-up pots, and saying, okay, this is a solution to poker. So it's yeah. So there is no thing. I went to like 20 or 30 pages of Google, and I didn't find a single link that linked to something other than poker that said game theory optimal. And in no game theory textbook do you see the three words together.
You got a lot of free time there, my friend.
Huh?
You got a lot of free time on your hands.
No, but the thing is, I've studied game theory. But yeah, it's I just needed to find I was like, I needed to find some ground to make an argument, right?
Yeah.
So the thing is that going back to like why it is useful to study these things, maybe you have not a lot of experiences, that you understand how if somebody knows what you're doing exactly, you can still like overbet and you can still do stuff because of how your range will interact with the board, and that is actually very useful. It will like expose you to a lot of spots very quickly that you would otherwise have to play a lot with experience, right? And
yeah. So for me, when I haven't used solvers, but I've played against a lot of people who have used solvers, and I've talked with people that have used solvers. The best use for me has been just finding different lines to take with different hands. So I think for people who are less talented at poker, another big part is being very balanced, which doesn't come naturally. Like a lot of people can't juggle all of these variables in their mind. Like, oh, I'm going to do this, but I also need to represent that I could be doing this with a bluff. And a lot that it does get very complicated for a lot of people. But the best players don't struggle with the idea of like being perceived as balanced. But the best thing in my opinion is like, for instance, I found out only through using solvers that when a straight comes in on the turn, you can, and you know, you've check called flop, you can lead turn like, you know, 20% or 15% or whatever it is in the different spot. And that's something I just, you know, I thought about poker for so many years, for so many hours in those years, and I never once thought of that as a line to take. And yeah, so the solver for me is by proxy through other people being a huge tool for creativity.
Yeah, what I think is very useful, and yeah, is that when you have a theory, you can test it really quickly. So, for example, you can make up a range that you think a recreational is likely to play, and you'll find ways to punish that you can't like compute in your head quickly.
Yeah.
So that's why they're very useful, and again, that's their like original. Oh, that's how they came up. I mean, pre-flop ranges, the ones we see today that sell for hundreds of dollars, they didn't exist when PO Solver came out. People grabbed PO Solver, weaponized it with these subset of flops, and then came up with these pre-flop ranges. So the solvers were meant to be like a lab or a testing tool in order to be able to be an upgrade to like card runners easier or whatnot, and just be able to compute or test your ideas against somebody who knows exactly what you're doing, right? And again, you can actually node lock in order to, for example, make the solver call or fold or raise or whatever in some situation. So it doesn't like try to balance everything. But it's more cumbersome and it takes a lot of time. And for a beginner, it's definitely better to keep your assumptions the same. In this case, the bet sizes and the ranges, the pre-flop ranges, and then just try to get exposed to as many flops as possible in turns and rivers, respectively. So that's how it should be used. When it becomes like this Bible in which you check your beliefs against, is where it goes awry, because you forget that you're making these assumptions which are categorically untrue about how people are actually playing, right? You're not like some people in a 6-max cash game never play like pocket forward under the gun, some play it always. And again, you can make assumptions based on that, but it's I think people get like carried away with, and you get like high stakes crushers like Stefan Burakov, you know who that is? Yeah, who just understand how these GTO robots think, and you know, and he smashes them. But yeah, it just takes a superior mind, and it takes a superior level of skill to be able to do that. So yeah, I've been guilty of this. Like when I first heard you ran, I was like, yeah, fuck that guy, he's wrong. and I was like, yeah, he's wrong because of what I've read and what I've heard, and how can you like go against game theory? Well, in reality, like, and also like, yeah, it's made like it's taken like this. It makes it like very easy to like wrap your head around. Like I just need to like use this tool, study it, and then I'll be better than everyone else. It's like it's sort of like a shortcut to thinking. So
I'll give you a better analogy. It's people satiating and quelling their daddy issues. Like they've yearned for that strong figure of authority their whole life, and they finally found it in Daddy Pio Silva.
That's pretty good, yeah. It does calm a lot of insecurities.
Something I want to put past you, and something that, by the way, thank you very much for putting this into more structured way of thinking, that there are a couple of things you've really actually helped me understand here. So thank you. It's very rare when I speak to a game theory oriented person that I feel like I've come away from actually learning something significant. One thing that I think is very pertinent that you said. So going back to the rock paper scissors analogy. So obviously, if your opponent is not adjusting anymore, but is only ever throwing is throwing rock like 35% of the time, and then throwing the other two like 32% of the time, whatever it is, your optimal strategy is to throw paper every single time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's it's very difficult for people to understand that.
Yeah. And so to take that into a poker analogy, there you could change if somebody's deviating from equilibrium even slightly, which everybody is. There are likely going to be many situations where you're meant to only turn up with bluffs, and other situations where you're only meant to turn up with value bets. And
exactly, yeah.
I think that people don't understand. I haven't articulated that well before, but thank you for sharing that. People don't understand that there are and for me there are probably 50 to 70% of post flop spots. When I choose a size, I'm only ever going that size with value, or it's going to be 80 to 90% value, but it just so happens that another bluff would probably wants to go that size for some reason because it interacts with the board in some way.
Another important thing, which I've seen people say, criticize you and say that's not a thing, and when they mean not a thing, what the fuck does that mean?
Yeah.
Are you saying it's not a thing because of what he just did the thing? Okay, so it's not a thing in GTO. What the fuck is GTO? I mean, they don't know, right? Because again, because they've been soothing their daddy issues with this word optimal. That you see, the thing I don't think we would have come to this if somebody in the beginning just chose to use the word another word that is not optimal, right? Because when you use the word optimal, it just colors the whole concept, right?
Yeah, if we called it game theory assumed equilibrium or something like that, something.
Or game theory strategies, game theory. Game theory equilibrium would have been fine, right?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, because when you say optimal, I've been 100% guilty of this. When I hear the word optimal, I'm saying, okay, how the fuck can you go against an optimal?
Yeah, you can't be more optimal than optimal, asshole.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
but again, you can use a solver, and you can actually use, I think it's called Deep Solver online, where it allows you to no log and uses neural nets to solve quicker instead of actually going to the back and forth.
But you'll still have to assume people's tendencies, which is tough.
Yeah, no, but it no logs. Yeah, but it has some preset parameters just to play around. Just just try to play against the net. You'll see how it deviates significantly from the.
Yeah, the problem with these things is that to try and emulate how a nit plays in a computer is nigh impossible, because some nits, a lot of nits, will play really, really tight when it comes to they'll just always fold second pair on the turn to an overbet no matter what spot it is, but then they'll also call down top pair for 150 bigs basically no matter what in the same spot. So to node lock that, and then all of the different spots where they play flush draws pretty stickily, but then they're folding straight draws randomly for some reason. They're not check raising some gut shots, but other ones they are. It's so multivariate that the input. So it's so multivariate that you can't emulate it. So the input that one puts into these solvers is always going to be hugely off. And this is where human intuition comes into play and says, well, I've played 5 million hands of poker. I've paid attention to how nits play in these certain spots with that certain timing, with that certain dynamic that we've had. Take that multivariate analysis, put it inside your fucking psyche and see what fucking comes out. And that to me is the closest that we're going to get to optimal until maybe supercomputers do some more stuff.
Yeah, I agree, because you're actually playing limit hold'em. The solver can't. The solver plays limit hold'em. Let's call it a limited version of limit hold'em, and it doesn't account.
I actually disagree slightly with your definition there, because even no limit hold'em is limited, because you might only have 200 different bet sizes.
No, yeah, exactly. But it's still you're not playing. Even if you have like let's say you severely limit the bet sizes post flop. So what you're doing is you're drastically simplifying no limit hold'em into a game that is manageable
Yeah,
in terms of you can read the output from the in the
yeah,
grid, right?
yeah, yeah,
So that's what, and again, it does, like you said, it comes up with lines that you may never have thought of, and that's useful. But again, let me read you a tweet I saw from Patrick Howard on Twitter. He said, "There's a widespread myth that GTO strategies don't win much money because they don't exploit opponents' mistakes. This is the
yeah.
wrong way to look at it. GTO never makes pure strategy errors. Never making a mistake is a huge edge when your opponents make mistakes all the time." So he clearly doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about because the thing is, and he's a very recognized like high stakes player and coach. The thing is that GTO goes back to the chess analogy. If somebody makes an egregious blunder in the opening, you have to punish that. You can't just like stick to your GTO guns because he's making a mistake. I mean,
Can
let's
you
say
can
that
you send me a
somebody
link to that tweet so I can get up on stream? Because you kind of read it quickly.
I read on my phone. Sorry, it was a screenshot. It wasn't.
When did
Just
he?
check the Patrick Howard and even like the BP coach George responded and said, "Yeah, that doesn't make sense." And
When did he say this? What was the date?
it was February 15th, 2023.
February 15th, 2023. Okay, keep talking.
So what he's saying is that GTO never makes pure strategy errors again, but based on its assumptions. So if you're and again, what he's referring to GTO is this equilibrium strategy that derived from these pre-flop solves that are based on these 184 flops, right? So what he's saying is that, but again, back to the chess analogy, if you make a huge blunder in the opening in which you expose your queen, allowing it to be captured by one of your pieces, yeah, you could say, yeah, if I stick to GTO, that's still a mistake. I'll exploit that in the future. Keep playing my opening. It's still a bad place to keep your queen, or you can just capture it, right? It's a huge blunder not to do it. And again, a chess engine will adapt in real time, but because it's a much simpler game, right? So in poker, it's a lot more difficult. But yeah, uh, even like, I've heard like Jason Kuhn say some, again, excellent players say dumb shit like, yeah, I'm playing heads up in this challenge, in this live like poker go heads up sitting go. Yeah, but I'm ready to play anyone, but I train to play against an optimal player. Who the fuck is an optimal player, right?
Yeah,
And again, you can see someone like Stefan crushing Limitless heads up because he just understands how he thinks, right? So yeah, the game is um, the game is more complicated, and the actual players making the most money, they don't play like your solver, and uh, like streamers are the most guilty of trying to play like the solver. Obviously, not you, but because they again, it's the sense of security that you just can open a browser app and check the solution, and then it confirms that you had to make that call, right? And
yeah.
yeah, the fight.
They're like, good job. Daddy says it's good. I got the thumbs up approval.
No, well, what I've come to the conclusion is because of my own failings was that yeah, you're just using it as an excuse not to think.
Yeah,
Because yeah,
yeah. Thinking's hard, man. If I've seen something from poker players, is that they really don't like to think for themselves. A lot, not all of them, but a lot of them. What
yeah,
do you have what are your poker credentials? Are you a well-known person in the world or in the poker
no,
world?
no, no. I'm starting to play cash again. I've played at some sitting goes like 6 years ago or something. Made like 15K because I ran hot. Thought I was the shit. then then I quit. Went to university. I work. I am a programmer, and I just starting to get back into. I always watched it. I've always kept watched some of the streams, the highlights, like Hustler Casino Live, Live the Bike.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the Trident series. Not a great poker player by any means, but I do understand game theory better than
Yeah, it sounds like you understand game theory better than I do for sure. I think when it comes to applying it to poker, it just takes a lot of practice. So you're obviously not going to be able to do that super well, but it sounds like you have the right brain for it.
Yeah, and just I heard you briefly say something about P. Clark because he said he was one of the best like poker theoreticians.
Theoreticians, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not gonna argue with you or against that. I'm just gonna say you can be a great theoretician and not be a great player. The example of this is Matthew Janda. He wrote two great books that have been like largely disproven, but
Is
and a
that your
lot of
best
the
example?
no, but he actually like he was a. I mean, there's been great theoretical physicists like Einstein, which now have theories that they came up with that are being disproven. It doesn't mean that at the time or with your knowledge, it wasn't a great theory. He did. You. I mean, you can be. I don't know any great examples, but yeah, you
No,
can theoretically.
you're definitely right. I was just messing.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I know, but you can be.
I guess that my difference would be to be a great poker theoretician. You know, if you're literally just talking about, I understand like the definitions of game theory and I understand these things, like I technically you could define that as a theoretician, but you could also define a theoretician as somebody that knows how to apply it in a real world setting, which would then discount certain people.
Yeah, I think he defines because I've seen some of his actual paid content. He describes like when he says GTO in theory, he's talking about the aforementioned equilibrium strategies and how they interact with different situations. And he does know a lot of stuff. And by the way, you told me you were asking for a good GTO coach.
Yeah, yeah.
Check out this guy called Poker Giraffe, Ching Yang. Pokergiraffe.com. I think he's probably the best you can get. Yeah.
What does he play? What can he beat?
He used to be a high stakes 2K reg. I think he's a full time coach now, but he's really, 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 really smart.
Okay. Thank you.
And you can watch his YouTube channel and
Make
make
my
your
mind up.
own. Yeah, but I think he's the way he challenged your thinking, like there's a back and forth where he goes with a GTO wizard coach, another guy that tries to think about the game, I think, and he tries to. They challenge each other with questions. I think you'll find that great content.
Sounds great. I'm actually gonna probably make this a YouTube video, by the way, just this conversation.
Oh, I was expecting that. Yeah. So
I'm gonna call it Charlie Gets Schooled on GTO.
yeah,
Debate.
I didn't put my last name because I do play some live games that are really soft, and on the off chance that somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What do you think, if anything, I get wrong when I'm talking about GTO? Apart from the getting confused about the word optimal, which I definitely haven't been able. I feel like I've understood it intuitively, but I haven't articulated it anywhere near as well as you have in this conversation. Apart from that, do you feel like there's something I'm getting wrong about the whole concept?
I think you sometimes because you are like correct in many of your assumptions, you might sometimes discredit the use of blockers or something too much. You might like think, and there are some situations where it doesn't matter because again you're playing against a fish and the range is just skewed towards value, so blockers don't matter. There are some situations in which depending on who you're playing against, backdoor flush draws, backdoor straight draws, these hands that you would call raise or whatever on the flop that are mixes sometimes. Those things can make a lot of sense, and those things have their place. Not saying that I don't have like this like textbook of all of the things you said about GTO.
Yeah, I don't feel like that. I'm sure there are times where I do that, but I think like when I was playing 500 Zoom a lot, and I really had to start balancing because we were getting to the point where people understood my strategy, I understood theirs. That's when I started paying a lot more attention to blockers. But when I'm playing like 200 Russian cash, where everyone's not very good, I think there are some spots where I'll be like, okay, actually having the King of Hearts here blocks fucking 35% of his value combos, so that's really important. But yeah, I don't feel like it's almost ever a situation where it would drastically change my decision just having a blocker. because people are just making so many mistakes with such a huge part of their range that to base a decision on just a blocker is very very often just not sensible.
Yeah. Again, I would have to listen to the conversation with CG and other players. I haven't, but yeah. What is? Maybe you can tell me more about what you think about GTO and your arguments against it, and I can say if there's anything wrong with your logic.
I don't have any arguments against GTO. It's just when the main thing that I have is exactly what you've been describing is the misapplication of game theory. When I went on that impassioned rant about fuck GTO, it was definitely all over the place because it was kind of the first time that I'd really articulated it in a long form way. But it was essentially describing the mind virus that swept through the poker community of misapplying the concepts of game theory and putting it inside strategies that are drastically suboptimal, and also trying to teach new players these things, which are like hugely complicated when somebody just like barely knows what a continuation bet is damaging so many people. And teaching
Yeah.
people that they have to make their decisions based on blockers when they're playing 2NL is like a wild thing to do to somebody's head, and it's ruining people's careers.
Yeah, let me give you an example.
Yeah,
Let me just say this: the people who are getting ruined by the GTO, let's say, going mainstream.
you might need to be a little bit more articulate because your microphone's a little bit
Sorry.
potatoey.
So the people who are like being misled,
Yeah.
that includes myself, with GTO, are people who are not going to be crushers anyway. So not saying that it doesn't do damage, but
I disagree, man. I've coached hundreds of people, and there have been many people where they're great people, they have sharp intellects, like fantastic ability to understand poker, but when it comes down to it, they just so happen to have learned from Doug Polk in the first 2 years of their life, and then you just switch like a couple of things, and instantly you see their graph just skyrocket up. And then some really sharp people do that. I think it's very easily for very intellectual people to get misled quite early. And the reason that so many of the top crushers at the moment are very very game theory oriented and can get away with it is because they had that 8 years of learning poker without game theory,
Yeah.
and they have that range analysis intuition that's just built into them from day one.
Yeah, I'm maybe wrong about that. I just think that it's targeted, or at least that's my opinion. I think it preys on people who are not doing much thinking anyway. Because again, for you to, I mean, I don't think anyone like says you should copy a solver with a straight face, or anyone who's actually talking smart about the game.
Yeah.
What I do think happens is that, but what I think is, let me give you an example of something that's really useful that you can learn with GTO or something. It's a very small example, but
Yeah.
there's things like, for example, you're on a king or ace high flop with two low cards. You have like pocket eights. And let's say one of the low cards is a four. If you have 5-4, it's a better continue than pocket eights.
Yeah.
That might be something that is very difficult to wrap around ahead of a beginner. And when you use some terminology and definitions in the context of GTO, it does allow you to like have a foot call, and like, again, I use the word theory loosely here, but yeah, and like, for example, have a framework. Okay, so when you're like, poker used to be a lot more, I don't want to say exploitative, but a lot more like the Wild West. So people didn't think like in a structured way, which that's what I think the GTO movement has improved. People are like much more deliberate about their thought process.
Yeah.
Much,
100%.
so that's why like the level of poker has improved with solvers,
But
not getting worse.
I really, sorry, Karen, I'll speak after.
So it does, because with these exploits and these huge assumptions, you can't, if you have them wrong and you get the wrong feedback for a couple of hands because of variance, you can have a leak for years, right? And like, if you input your assumptions into a solver and it punishes you and you understand how it's punishing you, you'll get the feedback very quickly. So it allows for like off-table testing, and it allows for, like, again, a logical thought process if you know how to use it. If you just look at a grid and say, oh, pretty colors, uh, red means bad,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
yeah, you understand. So that's you can't like judge a tool or a way of thinking because of the way most people misapply it. You can judge the people who are misapplying it, definitely. But it's like, people grabbing something out of context on YouTube, or it's just gonna happen, right?
Yeah,
Um, and again, it makes for great content because you put out a YouTube video and you show, oh, but the computer does this just as
yeah,
you do
yeah,
in
yeah.
chess. And in chess, it actually, again, it's not the same as well, because, for example, you get a chess engine that calculates like 100 million moves per second, and that's like the engine most players use, and that engine will get crushed by like AlphaZero, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Which
yeah.
has a different way of thinking. It thinks in neural networks, and for example, so it doesn't mean like there's a in poker there's much more of like in poker the equilibrium makes much more sense, but you have to understand that you're dealing with very different like style games with complete and incomplete information. Poker is much more complex, and I think just the way of studying that came about in chess just translated to poker. It just bled into it, and people just started saying, okay, so if I can study like the top chess players who are really smart, maybe I can be smart too. And again, people will misuse tools all the time. You can use, broom for, cleaning, or you can use it to hit someone in the head. It's but yeah, I just wanted to clarify and give you the tools to argue better in the future, like
No,
thinking about.
I appreciate it. I will push back just on one thing. I'm going to go spend the rest of the night with Hannah in a second. But one thing I will say is I have a very deep disagreement with a lot of people about how optimal learning strategies look like. And it does depend on the person. But in my opinion, the more talented somebody is, the less structure they want when learning something. So, for instance, using myself as an example, not saying I'm like the quintessential talented person, but using myself as an example for poker, I had a knack for it. I barely watched any coaching content. I never got any coaching, anything like that. If I had access to Pure Solver or something that would like really knock my leaks out of my game, I probably would have made a lot more money a lot more quickly, uh, in a very very short space of time.
Yeah,
But what wouldn't have happened is that I wouldn't have made those mistakes 80 times over and started to see myself get punished and feel myself get punished in all of these very unique spots, because obviously every spot is absolutely unique. And that wouldn't have given me this deep fundamental intuition about why a certain bet size is good, or why people are never bluffing this spot, or why people are. And that to me is so important with a huge proportion of very brilliant minds when it comes to poker, is not giving them all the answers. Let them figure it out themselves and then layer up their thought process. So for instance, I have students that, they'll get to 100 zoom, they've crushed 100 zoom on stars without any understanding of game theory, or barely any. And then I'll be like, okay, now it's time. Now, in my opinion, it's time. It's time to study the ranges. It's time to study how other people are thinking about game theory. But you've managed to absolutely annihilate people just based on pure fundamental range analysis and understanding how they will perceive your range and understanding how to be on the level above that. And then, if you want to, like somebody actually said, Bobby Winger said in the chat, he said, for me, learning GTO is a way to understand how my opponents are playing so I can put them on ranges that I can exploit. And that's exactly it. It's like, well, they're not actually playing GTO. They're not, they're playing some weird simplified equilibrium strategy pretty badly. But you need to understand that. You need to understand why they're playing. You need to understand how they're playing. You need to understand their thought process so you can be on the level above that. So you know that they're going to be overfolding third pair. They're going to be overcalling top pair because game theory fucking is hard, or
yeah,
whatever it is. So yeah, I guess my fundamental disagreement with a lot of people, and maybe with you, would be
yeah. We could argue about it back and forth another day because you have something to do. But what I would say is this, at least for me, if I hadn't had a good explanation of toy games, like simple like
Yeah,
one-street
yeah.
games that have game theory at the beginning, it would have made me a completely different player. I think that's where I would say that's a good like game theory crutch. Understand that, and then maybe do what you're
Mm.
doing. But
And so in these toy games, are you finding equilibrium, or are you
yeah,
finding
yeah.
it?
But for example, like the toy games, like the Ace King Queen game, you can find the Mathematics Poker like 2005 game book,
Okay.
right? So it's very old. You'll find that it's called the Carrel game. So what you're doing is like, um, out of you give the out of position player the king, and you give the in position player an ace and a queen, and what you're solving is like the optimal bluff catching frequency and also the optimal bluffing to value ratio frequency, right? Not that you have
Oh,
to
sorry. You give the imposition to like either the ace or the queen.
either the ace and the queen.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, okay.
it's yeah, yeah. Sorry. Um, so this is the simplest toy games that are more complex. But because the more complex toy games actually like get very close to an actual poker game, you start to use blockers and stuff. So you understand what to bluff with and what to bluff catch with, and you understand how it reaches equilibrium. What you need, what's very useful about this is that it at least for my mind, which is very scientific, and logical, it allows you to like see the game in a way you've never seen it and understand that these things exist. And like it does give you like an understanding of how you might be like misapplying like bluff to value ratios in many situations. Not that you have to like hit any frequencies by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just saying that it does give you that theoretical like you can solve 5 or 6 toy games and then go into full like reading what players are doing, like the things you do, which I think are really good. And then you can go back to like studying these equilibrium solver libraries and trying to gain insights from that. Uh, but I do think like an exposure to game theory heavy toy games at the beginning is very very useful. Although because they expose how counterintuitive poker might be, and it allows you to like open the thing in your mind that says, okay, this is like not only more complicated than I thought, but it's counterintuitive. It doesn't always make logical sense what to do in every situation. Like for example, leading the turn when or the river when the straight hits,
Yeah.
right? Those are things that not necessarily you're gonna get exposed to in a toy game because you won't. You can design a toy game around that. But for example, this coach I recommend a poker draft. You'll find some toy games in his that he came up with in his YouTube videos, which you'll find interesting. For example, in flops where the solver wants to overbet, um, he removes like a lot of combos from the solver's range, and then from the imposition player's range, he says, "Okay, what do you think the solver will do? Will it stick? Would it resolve to a lower bet size, or will it still keep betting with a large size but a lower frequency?" And it makes you think like, okay, so how how do you think about strategies, right? It can be a very useful framework. I'm not saying it's the be all end all. Poker was played and studied way before these teams came to like the poker mainstream. I'm just saying that that's something I would argue and disagree with you. I do think these toy games are extremely useful, explained by a good explainer, right? Because you can have a very smart
Yeah, yeah,
person,
yeah.
and because and to give all the caveats of the limitations of these and etc. Right? But yeah, but yeah. So yeah,
I I I think you're right, and I've never considered using toy games to teach. I feel like I would have disagreements of when to give them to certain people, and it'll obviously be individualized.
yeah,
But because a lot of people really aren't mathematically minded in poker, they're really not. Um, yeah, even yeah, even some of the best players in the world, they're just not very mathematically minded, which is pretty amazing.
I agree. Yeah,
But yeah, I was gonna be a fucking mathematician if not for poker, and it's fucking wild. I turned up as the fuck GTO
yeah. I
anti-mathematical
heard
guy.
you were roommates with Ben Heath. I didn't know about Ben Heath. I heard of I heard his podcast with Poker and Vision. It was interesting.
He's a fantastic. His mathematical mind is sharper than mine. He studied maths at work and I think got a first. Yeah, he got a first and just like
Yeah, and if you want to like a tool to, I think a lot of people should try to do proofs because you don't need a mathematical background to do proofs. They're just logic based.
that's a
And
good
if
point.
you
Yeah.
are, and if you become really good at proofs, you can like become really good at logic. If you're good at logic, you'll be good at poker. Poker's a logic game. It's not a math game. You won't actually compute sums or do anything in your head. You'll logic about. You'll try to think how players arrive at each situation with what ranges and try to attack those ranges, right? Or at
Yeah.
least parts of those ranges. So yeah,
I'm gonna call you off now just because I promised Hannah I was gonna go see her. So I will summarize by saying that this is something I love about these streams is that anyone can call in. Sometimes you get someone that's like fucking wild and toxic, and sometimes you get Chris. And you are, first of all, I can sense you're very humble intellectually, in the sense that you're not attached to your own ideas. And you're not putting yourself up on a pedestal, which is difficult when you know that you have a deeper understanding about a certain topic than other people. It's difficult to fight that egotistical urge sometimes. So I really appreciate that. Secondly, we will disagree on how to teach people, which is a natural thing. I've spent a lot of time teaching a lot of different people, but I'll also have my own selection bias because the more fuck mathematics people will come to me. So perhaps there's something to be said there. Thirdly, the points that you've made have taught me things, many things. It's like a good 4 points that I could summarize now that I'm at least going to go away and think about very deeply, or have already changed my mind on, in the sense of like the tools that you've given me to articulate about GTO. In particular, how people define optimal is very interesting. How people would deviate, or how optimal is to deviate heavily away from strategy, even if a slight deviation in the other person's strategy is made. That's very, very useful heuristic to be able to articulate. I'm very curious about the toy games for new students or relatively new students, and also the last thing then that I'll give you for myself as well. I've been looking to have a deeper understanding of game theory in my own leagues because of that, and I'm definitely wanting to go check out Poker Draft. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I just sent you a message on Discord. If you want to talk, you and me, just because I think for your viewers, it can get very. I can be a lot more technical. I can get a lot more specific, but it will drag 4 hours. So if you want to talk about anything, toy games or anything, I just sent you a message on Discord. Yeah.
I've sent you a message back. Cool. Yeah. Let's fucking do it. Yeah. Why not? It's really fucking nice to actually learn something on one of these streams. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. I really love your content, and you've helped me think a lot better about the game. So thank you first and foremost for having the platform and the goodwill to put things out. Really like what you're doing with the cheaper products and the community. Glad to have helped, at least in a very small way, if any. Glad to give back to someone who's given me a lot of value. So,
cool. Fuck yeah. All right. Now we're done jacking each other off. Let's tie a ribbon on it. Thanks, dude. I'll speak to you. I hope we can do a proper podcast. Give you I'll even fucking send you a nice microphone if you'll fucking use it.
I have one. I just have it. I went to. I'm at another apartment now, so I left my previous apartment. So I'll just get a better mic and we can talk again.
All right, cool. All right, peace, dude.
Bye.
See you. Beautiful. Had some technical issues. Stream died. My webcam's fucked up. Everything like that. But those were two very fucking great conversations. And potentially you could argue that my energy going into this was a lot less confrontational. I didn't call it a debate or anything like that. I just said conversation. And the two people that turned up were very fucking nice. Very articulate. And I had things to learn from both of them. Maybe that's something I could learn about Maybe it just depends on the mood that I'm in, depending what I should go for. Anyway, beautiful people, I'm off to spend some time with my fam. I love you. You're valuable for the merit purely of being human. Peace.